Now, senators on the Armed Services Committee are getting a closed briefing right now in that controversial September 2nd strike on an alleged Venezuelan drug boat. This comes as President Trump orders a total and complete blockade of sanctioned oil tankers coming to and leaving Venezuela. Joining us now is Republican Congressman Mike McCall of Texas. He's the chairman emeritus of both the House Foreign Affairs and House Homeland Security Committees. Congressman, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks,
Before we talk about Venezuela, got to ask you a quick question about the breaking news we're following. At least 4 Republicans, your colleagues, just broke ranks to sign House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries' so-called discharge petition, forcing an actual vote on the House floor on an extension of the Affordable Care Act subsidies. What do you make of that?
Well, I think these are obviously Republicans who are in swing districts that may be threatened in the midterm election, and there are apparently a sufficient number of signatories to the discharge petition to allow it to come to the floor. In fact, it must come to the floor. I would assume after the holiday season in January. My prediction is with a sufficient number of Republicans signing on to this that it would pass the House. I don't think the fate in the Senate will be very good, however. I don't think the Senate would pass it.
How about you? Are you going to vote for it?
Well, you know, look, I've been against Obamacare my entire career. I don't believe in a government-run subsidy program. I think it needs to be more competition and choice in a private health care system. I'll probably vote no. And certainly signing a discharge petition is very dramatic. It breaks from leadership and the committee process. I've never signed one myself. But, you know, I do understand these members who are in tough districts, and it's a big issue for them back home.
It's a huge issue for millions of Americans whose health care costs are going to skyrocket unless they get something passed and deal with this, right?
Well, I think when they do expire at the end of the month, you are going to see a reaction by the American people. That's why, you know, on Friday I'll be voting for the Republican substitute to Obamacare that I think we will pass in the House, and hopefully the Senate will take that up.
All right, let's move to Venezuela, a subject that you know a lot about. I want to play what the U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said yesterday about that boat strike video after briefing lawmakers. Watch this and listen.
In keeping with long-standing Department of War policy, Department of Defense policy, of course, we're not going to release a top-secret, full, unedited video of that to the general public.
You've called for the Pentagon to actually release the video. What do you say to Secretary Hegseth?
Well, I think the president has called for that. What I would ask him to do quite specifically, Wolf, is this. Right now, the Armed Services Committee are being briefed in a classified venue. They're watching this video as I speak. Yet the House Foreign Affairs Committee that I chaired has not been given access to this video. And it's hard to comment on something you haven't seen. But my point is this. The House Foreign Affairs Committee has the power and the jurisdiction to declare war under Article 1 of the Constitution. It originates out of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, not out of Armed Services. I'm not saying that Armed Services shouldn't have access. They should. But I think in addition to them, the House Foreign Affairs Committee certainly should have access to this. I know House Intelligence has, and the Gang of Eight. But to limit it just to armed services, I think, is a big mistake. And I would say to him, with all due respect, that the committee that has the power to declare war and authorize use of military force should have the opportunity to view these videos.
Do you feel you truly understand what the Trump administration is now seeking to achieve in this conflict with Venezuela? Is the goal to combat drugs, seize oil, or ultimately have some sort of regime change in Venezuela?
Well, I think it's multifaceted. We just got a classified briefing from Secretary Rubio and Hegseth yesterday. You know, we've secured the land border. Now we're looking at securing our maritime border. There is a push in this administration to stop the flow of drugs into this country. As it pertains to War Powers Act, these strikes occur in international waters with designated terrorist organization cartel members. The criteria we were briefed on yesterday is very strict in terms of the exquisite intelligence we get, the layer of lawyers along the way before they can even strike. In fact, Secretary Rubio said there are many vessels that they felt they could have struck, but they did not because it didn't meet that requirement, and therefore they were just interdicted. He also said something, the big takeaway I got was that 90% of these vessels now have disappeared and gone away. In other words, deterrence works in this case to stop poison from coming in to the United States. The president has authorities under Article 2, self-defense of the Constitution. If they decide to go into Venezuelan waters and land territories, that is a whole nother situation that, in my opinion, would trigger the War Powers Act and require the Foreign Affairs Committee to make a determination.
Should the Foreign Affairs Committee declare war on Venezuela and give that authorization to the president?
Well, I think it's too early to judge that. I don't know if there's any plan to go into Venezuela and topple the regime. As you know, Wolf, better than anybody, we have a long history of trying to do this unsuccessfully in Latin America. And so I do think the president sees Maduro as a threat. He's under indictment in the Southern District of New York, for instance, by the U.S. Attorney. He has been a threat to the region, and it'd be good to see him go in a context that doesn't involve an armed conflict between the United States and Venezuela. If it does amount to that, then we would have to make that determination. I think it'd be premature to make that judgment call right now.
Well, can the U.S. engage in these kinds of military activities, boycotts and blockades of oil tankers, for example, and make these kinds of declarations without a formal act by the House of Representatives?
Well, this is Article 1 versus Article 2 authority under the Constitution. I would say that, President Kennedy's blockade of Russia, from entering Cuba, that did not involve the Congress making a declaration of war. In fact, the only time Congress has done that is World War II, after Pearl Harbor was bombed. I know that Presidents Reagan and Bush 41 have had strikes. For instance, Grenada is a good example. Reagan going into Grenada. But I would argue that Congress does have a role here under the Constitution. And if Venezuelan waters or territories are invaded or there's an armed conflict involving that we need to step up our Article 1 authorities and our powers.
Before I let you go, Congressman, as you know, Congress is getting ready to leave Washington for this holiday recess that's coming up. There seems to be at this time some growing frustration among lawmakers. I want you to watch what one of your Republican colleagues told CNN's Caitlin Collins. Listen to this.
I think the dam is breaking. Many Republicans may not have called him out, but last week 13 Republicans voted with Democrats to overturn one of President Trump's executive orders, which enabled him to fire federal workers. We also saw Indiana Republicans vote against redistricting. That is a sign where you're seeing Republicans, they're entering the campaign phase for 2026, which is a large signal that lame duck season has begun and that Republicans will go in all in for themselves in order to save their own reelections.
What do you make, Congressman, of Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene's assessment that you just heard? Is President Trump already a lame duck, as she says?
Well, I think President Trump still has tremendous power in Republican primaries. There's no question about that. I do find this dialogue and this conversion, if you will, of Marjorie Taylor Greene talking about how we need to tone down the rhetoric when she's been one that's thrown a lot of that out has been very fascinating to watch. And what you're seeing is now sort of a break within MAGA between Marjorie Taylor Greene and the MAGA crowd, if you will, and maybe a division within MAGA itself. I don't know. But to say that President Trump has no power in the midterm elections, I can tell you most Republicans desperately want his support in their primaries because the voters are still, in at least the Republican primaries, Trump is still very popular.
All right, Congressman Mike McCall of Texas, as usual, thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks, Wolf. Thanks for having me.
And we'll get another perspective from Democratic Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. That's coming up in the next hour. But coming up now, new images of the moment Nick Reiner was arrested for the deaths of his parents.